Some men don't succumb to bullets. They succumb to silence. To the stones they never threw. To the doorsteps they passed by rather than stood at. Have you ever sat up late at night, staring into the blackness, wondering whether you let your one opportunity to do what was right pass out of your hands? Well, Morgan did. No one spoke his name for years like it counted. The world didn't stop to find out if he was still alive. It just kept going without him. He had a wife one day. The next, an empty clod of earth behind the barn. Will wasn't searching for anything that morning. Just another fence to repair. Until he saw it. A sack. It was hanging crooked under a low cottonwood, swaying lazily in the breeze. The sort of thing a clever man rides by without a second thought. But Will reined in. Something about it was wrong. Too quiet. Too still. He rode nearer, squinting under the brim of his hat. The sack wasn't tied up, just hung caught halfway. Burlap fraying, sun-browned, torn. Dark smudges on the bottom. Then he heard it. A sound that settles in a man's bones and stays there. Not a scream. Not even a cry. Just breath. Weak. Human. Will dismounted his horse. Slow, careful. The sack moved. There was a young woman inside, mid-20s, perhaps. Her clothes were torn, skin sun-cracked and blistered. Her lips split and bleeding. One wrist still tied with rusty wire. She didn't beg, didn't cry. She merely gazed at him, eyes empty, and whispered as if she'd already passed out of the world. Just kill me fast. Will stood stock still. Then he knelt, pulling back the thin blanket that covered her. What he saw made his belly twist, not from fresh cuts, but from something worse. Whoever had done this hadn't simply wanted her to suffer. They had wanted her to go away. His ranch wasn't much. A crooked porch. 2 unoccupied chairs. A roof that creaked whenever the wind passed through it. But to her, it was the nearest thing to safety she'd experienced in years. Will didn't ask her name. Didn't inquire what had been done to her. Didn't ask why she'd been abandoned to die. And perhaps that's why she remained. She never slept in the bed, always huddled alongside the stove, as though the mattress would bite. She winced whenever the kettle hissed. Her eyes constantly shifted toward the door, as though waiting for it to fling open at any moment. She said nothing most days, merely drank whatever Will filled a tin cup with and nibbled at bread as though it would poison her. But she remained, and that was something. Will wasn't a talker either. Mended fences, fed the livestock, took her meals out like it was just part of the day. Perhaps the silence between them was a kind of language. It had been a week. One morning, Will was splitting wood when she came out. Her hair was pulled back in a hunk of cloth, shoulders straight but rigid, like she had to remind herself how to stand up straight. She didn't say a word, just watched him wield the axe. Then she grabbed a log. Will didn't intervene. They chopped wood together in silence. 2 people who'd exhausted their words way before they'd ever met. That evening, she broke her silence. Only one sentence. You didn't touch me. Will looked at her but said nothing. She nodded once, as if that said more than words could. And for the first time, she ate through to the end of her meal. Every bite. Then, she smiled. It wasn't simple, but it was genuine. And if the novel closed there, you might believe that it was about healing second chances. But healing doesn't happen easily. Not when the past is aware of how to locate you. The silence never lasts long out here. It began with hoofprints, deep, new in the ground by the south fence line. Will saw them as the sun crested the horizon. They weren't his, and they weren't from town. He did not tell her. Only checked the rifle, rode the border twice during the day. She sat closer to the fire that night than she ever did. She said she could not sleep. She said something was not right. Then came the brand. Not branded into cattle, branded into her skin. Inside her wrist, in drunken ink, 3 letters. JKS. Will had seen it before. Years before, on a drunk outside Bisbee who boasted too loudly about things no respectable man should boast about. Back then, Will looked away. Thought if he didn't look, he wouldn't get drawn into someone else's trouble. But now, those same letters were on her wrist. And that made his trouble. The next morning, he rode into Tombstone. Not to talk, to listen. 3 girls missing in the past 4 months. 2 from Texas. 1 from Santa Fe. All under 25. All disappeared without a sound. The sheriff shrugged. No witnesses. No evidence. No reason to cause panic. Will just nodded. Thanked him. Rode out like a man with no thoughts in his head. But something had snapped inside. This was no longer about justice. It was about her. That evening, in the glow of an oil lamp, she questioned him as to why he rode to town. He did not look up, only continued to scrub the rifle. Sometimes, he mumbled, men who are bad need to know someone's still looking. Her hand brushed his, briefly, and in that instant, Will realized, this wasn't her second chance. It was his. If you've read this far, perhaps you know the truth. Justice doesn't always have a badge. And if so, don't go anywhere. There's more to this tale. Will didn't ride up like some dime novel hero. He rode quiet, deliberate, over dry creek bottom and canyons where only the locals and coyotes roamed. He located the camp around sundown. A cabin propped against the cliff, smoke drifting from its chimney. Laughter within, rushing voices that crawled your skin. Will tethered his horse low in the trees, climbed up the back trail, and waited. Waited until the bottle clinked for the 3rd time. That was when men got slow. He kicked the door wide open. The first leaped up too fast, caught the butt of Will's rifle square in the chest. The second went for his belt. Will fired a warning shot out of the lantern, breaking glass, showering the room with sparks and smoke. The third one not even getting his knife off the table. Smoke still clung to the air when Will crossed the room to where the girl sat in the corner. She refused to look at him. Needn't. Now that the fight was over, he draped his coat over her shoulders, nodded once, then turned to the men still standing there, frozen. She's not yours. She never was. And if I hear you touch another girl again, there won't be a second warning. He took her to Tombstone. The sheriff started to protest. Even Will could not let it alone. Until Will set a broken blade and a bloodstained dress on his desk. That was enough. The law worked. This time. Back home. She was waiting by the gate. She didn't cry. She didn't ask. She just looked at him like maybe. Not all men were bad. This one. This time. For the first time in a very long time, Will didn't feel empty. He'd stood for something. It wasn't a love story. Not the kind you find in dime store paperbacks. But it was something. She stayed. Not because she was forced to, because she chose to. The days became quieter, gentler. Planted herbs in the garden. Took brushes to the horses without wincing. Even hummed one day sweeping the porch. Will noticed, but said nothing. Some things become meaningless when you utter them too early. He still repaired fences. Still went to bed before daylight. But now there was a second cup on the table each morning. A pair of boots by the door that wasn't his. Underscore, underscore, underscore. Some nights they sat under the stars, coffee in hand, saying nothing. And it was enough. Underscore, underscore, underscore. One evening, as the sun bled behind the hills, she asked, "Why did you come back for me?" Underscore, underscore, underscore. Will thought a while, then answered, "Because someone had to." Underscore, underscore, underscore. She nodded. That was all. Underscore, underscore, underscore. See, life doesn't always give us what we deserve, but sometimes it gives us someone who knows we deserve better. And that can change everything. She never said she'd stay. He never asked her to. But every morning she opened that door. Every night she came home. Love doesn't always burn with fire. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, like rain on old wood, like forgiveness, like beginning again. So ask me, if someone arrived at your door, requiring more than a bed, would you turn them away? Or would you open that door and rescue a part of yourself in doing so?